So what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about mathematical models in economics, um, especially how I would approach them, because sometimes they can be a little confusing. Um, and just, yeah, how I approach them, what to look for when we're doing this. So we have, I think the best way to approach it is just dive right into some practice problems. Here we have Jason, who has evaluated how a new bus route has affected property values in Provo. In reviewing his report, the city council is concerned that the number of residents and incomes also changed when the bus route was added, and that it is not clear whether Jason considered these issues. A mathematical model would have helped Jason by. Okay, so when we're looking at these mathematical models, there's really three things we want to look for. And we'll break down what these mean. But the first one is we have precise definitions. Okay? And basically what we want to equate this to is like an input. All right? The second one we want to look at is logical arguments. All right, and basically what we want to equate this to is a process. And then finally we have specific predictions. And what we want to equate this to is an output. So basically what this means is when we look at the problem, we want to there's some sort of process happening here, some sort of model being created or solution being provided, and usually there's a problem with it. So what we need to look at is the problem an input problem, is it a process problem, or is it an output problem? Or sometimes it talks about how they solve the problem, and did they solve it by clarifying an input, by clarifying a process, or by clarifying an output. Okay, so now how we look at it. So Jason basically was hired to evaluate a new bus route, but the city council is concerned that he did not take into account certain factors. So is the problem here the fact that he didn't take into account certain factors? Is this an input problem? Is this a process problem? Or is it an output problem? Well, I can tell you right off the bat, it's not an output. Okay, so I don't think it's an output. So is it a process or is it an input? He's not taking into account certain factors before he does his calculation. So this is an input problem because he has all these different variables, for example, when evaluating the new bus route, such as time, streets, maybe location, but they're concerned if he took into account these specific variables of number of residents and incomes. So the question is whether or not he had inputted the correct amount of variables. And as such, because it's an input, the correct answer would be precise definitions. Now, just a note, precise definitions and specific predictions often get confused because they sound similar, precise and specific especially. But the way I remember is definitions, is that more of an input or is it more of an output? Defining something is definitely more associated with an input, in my opinion. And then obviously predictions, you don't predict as an input. Prediction is more of an output. It's something that as a result of your process, your calculation, you make a prediction. And then logical arguments is a process. Okay? So now let's look at the next question. Norm creates a new economic theory, proposing that a tax on carbon emissions can actually reduce energy costs. When others express doubts that this is possible, he shows them a mathematical proof of his conclusions. This is an example of how mathematical models... Okay, so now let's see here. Is this a problem with... Is this an input problem, a process, or an output? Okay, so let's look at it. Greater detail. So Norm is proposing a new economic theory. However, others doubt this theory. And so what does he do? He shows them a proof of his conclusions. Okay, I'll tell you right now, it's not input. I think we can both figure that out. So is this a process or is this an output? Does the proof, was the proof an important part of his proposal? Not necessarily. So I would not say it's an output. The proof is just proving why he did what he did in order to reach the output, the conclusion that he made. So as such, this would be a process because they have doubts that he got on how he got to the answer that he did. So because that's why he does the proof. He's solving this problem, which is the question of the process. So this is how you should approach. And as such, the associated process would be logical arguments. So that would be your answer. Hopefully this makes sense. This can be tricky sometimes. It just takes practice. Go over these practice problems. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me and let me know of any other specific topics or questions you want covered in these videos. Adam out.